Hello and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about lost media, more specifically lost music. And under that umbrella, we're going to be talking about everything from, we've got a clip of the song, we've got no idea who sang it, and we're on the hunt. So we know exactly who this artist is, but we can't find quite a bit of their music anymore. So, maybe there's just a song or an album that never saw the light of day, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons why. And then on top of that, we're also going to talk about a fire in which quite a few master recordings of songs and albums were lost. And we've got a lot to talk about, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. You've likely heard this short clip of what people believe to be an 80s pop song recorded by an unidentified male singer. Currently, the clip is making its rounds on TikTok, and typically the caption is someone in disbelief that no one in the world has been able to identify this song, at least that we know of, despite billions of people being on TikTok and online in general. Because of this, some have been led to believe it's a demo a band or artist recorded, but the song was never released. There are different versions of the lyrics floating around, but one of the more popular accepted versions is, "You carry all that shame in disguise, caught up in your world of lies. Everyone knows that you got ulterior motives, tell me the truth." In 2021, the clip was uploaded to a site called What's That Song by someone named Carl92. Carl92 claimed the clip came from a cassette recording backed up on a DVD in 1999, but he doesn't remember where the song itself came from and doesn't have more of it. Carl92 claims he was likely just messing around and recording random things when he was learning to capture audio. So even though this mystery song is currently viral on TikTok, people all over the internet have been trying to identify it for a couple years now. In a sense, it feels like the perfect climate for something like this to blow up on TikTok. One, there's far less music on TikTok now that UMG has taken their music off the app, so there's just less music to focus on. Two, with entire series, movies, and albums being taken off of streaming platforms now, often without us even getting the opportunity to buy a physical copy, a lot of us have lost media on the mind. Some have theorized that Everyone Knows was used as a jingle for something, some saying a soda ad, others saying for shampoo possibly. There's a cracking noise some thought was a soda tap opening, but it's possible that background noise comes from the Carl92 recording and wasn't part of the original. The song does have the bouncy poppy production of a jingle, but the lyrics don't necessarily read, "I'm advertising something." They seem kind of cynical to me. But to be fair, sometimes regular songs are used in ads. If anything, to me, it sounds like something that might have been used in a TV show or movie, like a theme song, maybe even a song in a short trailer. Another prominent theory was that Everyone Knows That is an unreleased song from a well-known 80s act, Wham being a popular suggestion, and this clip just hit the internet a couple years ago. Supposed evidence for this is that Wham would fit the suspected timeline of the song's recording, and some people think the singer sounds like George Michael. Other than Wham, other artists like Osnie Mello, Joe Renoy, and even Boy George have been speculated to be the mystery singer, but Osnie and Joe have come out and said it's not them. And through process of elimination, other artists and songs called Ulterior Motives or Everyone Knows That or Everyone Knows have been ruled out. Another theory is that it could be a demo from an Australian pop duo called Savage Garden. The evidence for this is that the singer sounds similar and the band recorded a few demos. However, in a thread I was reading, several people made the point that Savage Garden formed in 1983 and the production Everyone Knows That sounds more dated. Like, it's technically possible it could have been made in the 90s, but the mid to late 80s is just far more likely. And users in that thread said they reached out to Darren Hayes to see if the song was a demo of theirs. But it's been about 4 months since those posts and no one returned to the thread saying he confirmed it, so likely another dead end. And then other people said the song reminded them of 80s Japanese pop, and based on the enunciation of the words, the singer might be Asian. Filipino was another guess. And on TikTok, I saw someone say that the counting all the sheep in the sky part might actually just be in Japanese rather than English, and that it could translate to "it was nice having a relationship with you." There were attempts to narrow down possible countries the song might have initially been broadcast and then recorded by Carl92. Lost Waves Wiki claims this audio recording was recorded with a 15.7 kHz pilot tone that was only present in MTV broadcasts, exclusive to a select few countries. The specific countries weren't stated, but the wiki goes on to say the broadcast could have been picked up by a CRT TV tuned into an American station. However, people pointed out at the time, which was 1999 that the recording was probably made, MTV wasn't available in Spain, not until 2000, and Carl92 is from Spain. And quite a few people are of the belief that the song was never broadcast on MTV, and that piece of information just isn't correct, but the song is from another TV broadcast that we of course don't know of. Another theory is that Everyone Knows That was recorded during a live performance, evidenced by some of the off-key notes, and that's the surviving snippet. It is pretty common for artists to play parts of songs at shows and then never release the song. In Everyone Knows That, people were theorizing it was a live performance recorded at a small show, hence why you can't hear a crowd in the background and there's no other footage that exists that we know of. To me and others, the snippet sounds like a professional recording, albeit not a perfect one, but it was likely recorded nearly 40 years ago. And even if the performance was live, it's still pretty much established the performance was shown on television at some point based on the frequencies. The only way I could see it being so-called live is if the artist did a live performance that was broadcast, maybe did a snippet of the song, maybe did the whole thing, but it was lip-synced, which is common for TV broadcasts. A music collector posting in Everyone Knows That agreed the singer likely wasn't American, but suggested they may actually be German based on the accent. They also raised the possibility the majority of the song is in a different language, yet the chorus is in English. This could make it harder to find other parts of the song or even connect them because you'd have to listen even closer to the voice, which could sound different based on the language, and even the production could sound different if it's a separate part of the song. The poster, named Moving in Stereo 78, thought the song might possibly be from an adult film, hence why it was recorded on a TV. So many people are claiming they haven't heard the song, and the fact that Carl himself was vague about where he found it. And according to another user, another mystery song from the 80s was identified after being found in a European adult film. Others suggested the song could be from a workout video or a VHS tape. To me, what's most likely is that Everyone Knows That is a song from a short-lived artist or group, likely not a well-known one, and the song was played inside some piece of media that aired on TV at some point. I would guess, like I said, it was an opening theme for a pilot, or it was included in some movie or show as royalty-free music. And the frustrating thing to think about is that it is possible that copies of whatever the song might have been played in also don't exist anymore. So even if someone correctly named where they first heard this song, it may still be impossible to confirm. And perusing through comments both on TikTok and on Reddit, several people said that Everyone Knows gives them sort of an eerie feeling, not because the song itself is scary, it's just oddly unbelievable that no one knows it. Or the fact that it's completely possible that even though the song's probably no more than 40 years old, the people most likely to identify it could be gone by now. It's also eerie to me to think that the child or relative or friend of the singer could have heard the song and just not known that they know the person who recorded it. It's also entirely possible the artist themselves has heard the song going around already, or any of the other producers or engineers and are like, you know what, please, I'm trying to chill, I'm in my 60s, 70s, what have you, and I'm just not trying to wake this up. And when learning more about the Everyone Knows That song, I saw a lot of people saying this reminded them of a lost EP made by an indie band called Panchico back in 2000. In 2016, a 4chan user uploaded the cover of the EP called Death Metal, saying they bought the record at a UK charity shop and they wanted help identifying the artist. The only lead they had was the band members' first names being listed on the back. The version the person purchased was badly distorted due to disc rot, so there was hope that by identifying the band, they could find an uncorrupted version of the EP. There's nothing online about Panchico, and after others realized they couldn't find anything either, a hunt ensued across social media and forum sites like Discord. In 2020, someone online, who I believe is still anonymous, realized a code on the album's cover linked to the Oxfam shop in Nottingham where it's likely sold. They then searched to see if anyone by the name of Owen, one of the names on the back of the album, lived in Nottingham, which he did. And after Owen was contacted, he confirmed he was a member of Panchico and the EP was recorded to send to labels, but nothing really came of it and Panchico disbanded shortly after. Owen reconnected with the other band members, and 20 years later, Panchico came together to remaster the songs from the EP, releasing them online for free. The group played a show in Nottingham to celebrate the reunion, and back in December, they announced a North American tour kicking off this April. And apparently Panchico is also working on a new album, and it's wild to think that likely would not have happened had someone just not bought their EP from a charity shop. When it comes to music and lost media in general, I feel like there are two main types. One, where there are examples like Everyone Knows That in Panchico, where people have the songs but are struggling to identify the artist. Then on the inverse, there are situations where we know the artist, but for some reason we can't find some of their music. I was thinking back to when I did my video on the Stunners, and I mentioned finding a lot of the songs and videos weren't available to stream and they only existed on YouTube because a fan happened to upload them at some point. And on that Stunners video, some people suggested that I look into NAOMI Amuro, who's a popular artist whose music is not available to stream anymore either. NAOMI debuted as a J-pop idol in the early 90s when she was just 14. Originally, she was in a group called Super Monkeys, but went solo just a few years later. NAOMI, hailed as the queen of J-pop, put out a string of successful albums and singles, including 10 solo #1s in Japan, and was known for her musical versatility. Several articles liken NAOMI to Madonna or Janet Jackson for a frame of reference if you're unfamiliar with her. And according to Entertainment Weekly, NAOMI, who's one of Japan's best-selling artists, has sold more albums in Japan individually than Katy Perry, Kesha, and Lady Gaga have in the US combined. In 2018, NAOMI officially retired, having announced plans to do so the year prior on her 40th birthday after 25 years in the music industry. Weeks after her retirement, though, her official website, fan page, and merch store were shut down. And just last November, about 5 years after her retirement, NAOMI's music is wiped off of streaming services. And her YouTube channel is gone too, and I only found her music videos through a playlist that somebody uploaded. And several dismayed tweets pointed out how unbelievable it was that the music of one of the biggest pop stars just suddenly wasn't available online anymore. Seems like all that remains on streaming are soundtrack songs that NAOMI did and some collaborations, and on Spotify, even her profile picture's gone. There's been speculation as to whose choice it was to remove the music, whether it was at NAOMI's request or the result of conflicts with her label or Avex, which is the conglomerate that owns it. But similar to the actual reason NAOMI decided to retire, I don't think there's a confirmed reason, despite there being plausible theories out there. The blog Random J-Pop stated that generally, the Japanese music market is less geared around streaming compared to places like the US, and fans purchasing physical copies of music is still very common. The author, known as Random J, also mentioned it can be pretty easy to find clips online of older but popular American acts, but you're less likely to find an equivalent amount of footage online of comparable contemporary Japanese acts. Random J claimed, "It's easy for us to go online and watch Michael Jackson performances from the 70s and hear the albums he recorded as part of the Jackson 5 and the Jacksons, Jimi Hendrix, Tiffany, Stevie Wonder, and more besides. But try doing the same for any of the popular, trailblazing, top-selling Japanese acts of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So many enka and city pop acts have no digital footprint whatsoever, making it hard to listen to their music. And because Japanese record labels tend not to repress and reissue albums with the frequency that labels do in North America, you can't even buy any of it at a decent price." Random J ended on the point that we're all coming to realize, which is that as much as streaming can broaden our musical taste, which is a benefit, we don't own any of the music, meaning we can lose access to it at any time. The situation with NAOMI reminded me a little bit of Blackground Records and how until 2021 you could not find their artist catalogs on streaming. Their newfound availability resulted from a distribution deal that Blackground, now called Blackground 2.0, made with the independent label Empire. And this meant that finally, albums made by artists like Aaliyah, JoJo, Timbaland, Magoo, and Toni Braxton were now available to stream. And since they were recorded in the 90s or 2000s, several of these albums are hitting streaming services for the first time ever. And especially in Aaliyah's case, I wonder how much streaming would have helped her keep her music alive. Not that it hasn't been, obviously, just how many more fans she would have gained posthumously had her music been more available. And speaking of record labels, there have been several occasions where lost music, or at the very least music that is lost to us, is because the label would not let the artist release it or they shelved it for some reason. An example is Mariah Carey's secret grunge alt-rock album that she recorded in 1995. Mariah recorded and produced the album called Someone's Ugly Daughter under the name Chick while recording her album Daydream, which was also released in 1995. Mariah later said recording the rock album after Daydream sessions felt like having a new alter ego and was a way to get out her frustrations, a lot of them probably being brought on by her marriage to Tommy Mottola and his control over her career. Chick was technically a duo formed between Mariah and her friend Clarissa Dane, with Clarissa being the lead singer and face. This change was made after Mariah's label Columbia denied the release of the album in its initial form. Columbia shelved the version of Someone's Ugly Daughter where Mariah is singing lead and released a version of the album with Clarissa Dane singing lead and Mariah doing backing vocals. The album's been pulled from Spotify also, but some of the songs and videos do still exist on YouTube. In 2022, Mariah said in an interview with Rolling Stone that she found the original version of Someone's Ugly Daughter where she's singing lead and some of the mixes as well. And she's hoping to re-release the album in some form at some point, albeit with some reworks and possibly some other people joining her on the project. Another example is Britney Spears' original Doll, which was the album initially intended to follow up In the Zone. Britney's label Jive said that specific album wasn't coming, nor were there plans to release the single Mona Lisa. But we did eventually get a re-recording of Mona Lisa, and instead of being on original Doll, the song was included on the soundtrack for Britney's reality show, Britney and Kevin Chaotic. What I didn't know somehow was that there's another lost track of Britney's called Rebellion, thought to have been planned for what eventually came to be Blackout. In 2006, Britney posted a snippet of the song to her website, along with an image of herself transforming into a tiger, but it was quickly pulled from her site. And at one point in 2007, Britney played part of the demo in her car, along with some other blackout demos, which were recorded by paparazzi. Even though a lot of blackout songs and demos likely intended for the album leaked, a full version of Rebellion has never surfaced. The most common assumptions were that either Britney's label Jive or her management prevented her from releasing Rebellion. The title and lyrics alluded to Britney feeling trapped and not wanting to be controlled by shiesty industry powers. This was even before she was placed under conservatorship in 2007. But in Rebellion, there's a sparkle of truth. The sister of Christopher Notes Olsen, one of Rebellion's producers, claims it was Jive that pulled the snippet from Britney's website and likewise blocked her from releasing the song. Notes' sister Angelica was speaking on his behalf because Notes passed away in 2010 after falling from a hotel balcony. There were conspiracies that Notes was gotten rid of for whatever reason, but foul play was ruled out. And the assumption of foul play is likely because Notes was one in a string of people related to the song who met misfortune. Notes' own manager had been murdered years before his death, though I couldn't find out if this was meaning 2006, 2007, around when Rebellion would have been made then posted by Britney. Scott Storch, who's also said to have produced the song, albeit a different version, developed a cocaine addiction soon after this that allegedly lost him about $30 million in just 6 months. And then another of the song's collaborators, Jeff Danduran, claimed that he'd been blocked multiple times from trying to acquire the rights to Rebellion, saying all 4 of his attempts resulted in cease and desist. Reading through Breathe Heavy, it seems like not everyone buys that Scott Storch or Jeff Danduran were even part of Rebellion and may have been hoping to profit off of it just by association. In 2019, Britney's former manager, Sam Lutfi, posted a picture of what looked to be like a collection of some demo CDs. One was labeled Rebel, leading some people to think he might have the full version of the song, and others to think that he doesn't and he just posted this for attention. What I find interesting though is that Angelica, again Notes' sister, claims to have a hard drive with all of his music on it, and she says it's about 17,000 songs, but only has about 50 seconds of Rebellion, which is the same clip that's already out there. But still, she believes someone has the full song and that it would eventually surface. If anyone does own it or at least have it, I would assume it's someone affiliated with Sony that has the master copy at the very least. But it is possible a full version of Rebellion has never been found because it doesn't exist. Then still in other cases, there are so-called lost albums that aren't lost to the artist, they're confirmed to exist, but for whatever reason they made the executive decision not to release that album. According to The Dream, Beyoncé recorded over 40 songs for Fela Kuti, an Afrobeats-inspired album, before scrapping it all together and releasing 4 instead. To follow his 2016 album Starboy, The Weeknd claimed he had a happy, upbeat pop album planned, but it ended up being shelved in favor of My Dear Melancholy, which came out in 2018. When he was asked if the scrap pop album would ever see the light of day, he said that it would never be released. And I would assume it's relatively common for artists, especially ones with longer careers, to have a lot of scrapped or so-called lost work, just from changing direction for an album or things falling through with their label or other collaborators. Prince, for example, is said to have nearly 2,000 unreleased songs and has multiple unreleased albums. It was said that he would make albums faster than they could be released, and so they'd eventually be scrapped when he decided to move on to a different project. And at times, it could be to the point where the collaborators might have helped him work on a song, but they just weren't surprised if it didn't end up being released. An example is his scrapped 1986 album called The Flesh, which is also the name of a short-lived band that Prince formed, but of course they never officially released anything. The album was whittled down to a collection of 5 songs recorded at live sessions that were about 15 to 25 minutes long, with one of the tracks called Junk Music being over an hour long. Prince gave the tracks to his sax player Eric Leeds, giving him free rein to edit or overdub the songs as he liked. Leeds somehow managed to get the final cut of Junk Music down to about 20 minutes. And he said when he finally finished the songs, Prince said they were cool, but Leeds said it was pretty clear to him the songs were never going to get released. He said that though Prince liked the songs, it was likely the case that by working through them and then having them edited, it was clear there just wasn't a tight project there. But part of Junk Music was included in Prince's film Under the Cherry Moon. Though The Flesh was scrapped, the project is said to have influenced the Madhouse, another jazz fusion band that Prince founded. Madhouse would release 2 albums together, titled 8 and 16. Prince wasn't credited as himself on these albums, and I don't think he would have been had The Flesh released anything either. He was simply credited as Madhouse. There was a planned 3rd album intended to be called 24, but the project was shelved in 1988. Still, even if it's normal, it is kind of weird to think so many artists have so much music that we'll probably never hear. Or the music might be available to us in one moment, but in the very next, very few people have access to it. And lastly, I wanted to talk about a situation where quite a bit of music was lost, often the master recordings of it, because it was destroyed. On June 1st of 2008, a fire ravaged through the backlot of Universal Studios Hollywood, which is both a theme park and a film studio. The accidental fire was started by maintenance workers repairing the roof in one of the buildings, and overall, the fire destroyed a King Kong attraction at the park, and of course the warehouse that housed the master recordings of several artists under the Universal Music Group umbrella. Initially, UMG spoke of the damage to the King Kong attraction, as well as several video files from the warehouse, also called the Video Vault. Some of the destroyed video files included films from the 1920s, as well as more recent ones like Atonement, and recordings of series like I Love Lucy, Law and Order, and The Office. UMG officials claim that none of the destroyed files were the only existing copies. In 2019, the New York Times put out the expose The Day the Music Burned, suggesting that according to obtained internal files, UMG publicly minimized the amount of content that was destroyed in the fire, and that they had not been upfront about the fact that several music recordings, many of them master recordings, had been destroyed aside from the video recordings that had been lost. In fact, the expose claims the so-called Video Vault that burned was one of UMG's main storehouses for masters on the West Coast. The Times estimated that about 500,000 recordings of songs had been destroyed, many of them master recordings of songs or entire albums. Some of the master recordings lost belong to artists including Duke Ellington, Mary J. Blige, 9 Inch Nails, Judy Garland, 50 Cent, Etta James, No Doubt, Janet Jackson, and Tupac. The list is very long, so pause to read because I do have it on screen for you. The author, Jody Rosen, claimed this event was one of the biggest disasters in the history of the music business. Writing about the damages, he claimed, also very likely lost were master tapes of the first commercially released material by Aretha Franklin, recorded when she was a young teenager performing in the church services of her father, the Reverend C.L. Franklin, who made dozens of albums for Chess and its sublabels. Virtually all of Buddy Holly's masters were lost in the fire. Days after the expose was published, several artists or estates of artists under UMG filed a lawsuit claiming their work hadn't been archived properly and in a location that was known to be prone to fires. Additionally, they claimed they'd never been informed that their masters or other recordings had been lost. The plaintiffs included the band Soundgarden and Hole, Steve Earle, as well as Tupac's estate and one of Tom Petty's ex-wives, and they were seeking $100 million in damages. In March of 2020, representatives at UMG claimed that while some of the music recordings had been affected, the New York Times had vastly overestimated the amount. For the master recordings that had been affected, Pat Krause, UMG's chief archivist, claimed that the majority of the songs weren't lost forever because even if the master recording was damaged, many of the songs had already been released and therefore several other copies existed. UMG also claimed that the fire didn't affect the availability of any music already out or affect the income of any of their artists. By April of 2020, the lawsuit against UMG had been dismissed. And by that point, Hole had already dropped out because they were assured their masters hadn't been lost, as had Soundgarden and Tupac's estate, though they didn't disclose their reasons. According to Smithsonian, UMG attempted to replicate some of the lost masters starting in 2010. They succeeded in replicating about 1/5 of the lost recordings, as much as they could be, using other existing copies. I'd assume the ones they weren't able to replicate, which was like 80% of them, were because vocal files had been lost or they were recorded with technology that was outdated or otherwise not at hand. Or in several cases, the song or album was unreleased, so the master recording which burned was the only copy that existed. The concept of lost media more broadly is a reminder that a lot of the things we make and do might be lost to time, regardless of any painstaking efforts that might be made to preserve that work. In terms of physical copies, like we just discussed, fires can happen, they can be destroyed, or even if they aren't necessarily bothered, over time discs and records can rot. But as we know now, with music being pulled off of streaming sites and physical copies being either scarce or non-existent, or in the case of social media sites like Vine or MySpace, you can have an entire trove of content one day and then the next it's almost like it was never even made. As always, do be sure to let me know your thoughts, let me know your feelings. I think my takeaway question is, this whole time I've been wondering, do we have more of a thirst for lost media, lost content now? Just because with the internet and with everything being digitized and on streaming, we sort of feel, even if it's not necessarily true, that we have more access to a lot of this media, or that we should be able to find it or it's somewhere, versus in decades, centuries past, where you were like, okay, I wrote this book by hand, this is the only copy, there was a fire, I know it doesn't exist anymore. Like, I would say no, because as humans, I'm sure we've always had a thirst for knowledge and we've always wanted to search and hunt for lost knowledge, so to speak. But I feel like our mindset has changed a little bit now, whereas we're like, okay, everything should be at my fingertips, and even if it's not currently, I bet I can make it that way. So let me know what you guys think about that. And then, of course, more generally, you can just let me know your thoughts on lost media or lost music overall, whether it's some of the works I talked about today, whether it's something completely different. But I would be also intrigued to know which lost album, lost song you would, like, I'm dying to hear it. If I can only get one piece of lost media, it would be this. Let me know down in the comments below so we can chat. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you can stick around for more. And if you'd like to become a channel member and get early access to videos, the link is in the description. Again, thank you so much for watching. I love you all so very much, and we'll see you so very soon. Bye-bye.